audio? Cool. Hey, in the meantime, Victoria, can you tell me if the audio is crackly or not? Oh, y'all can keep talking. I'm just going to figure out the audio first. Audio good. Awesome. Okay. Hey, everyone. So we're about to start getting into El Mock Testorino here. So today is week 1, day 5, which means we're going to do the mock test. Let me just check one thing real quick. Oh, snap. You were not doing the mock test right now. Oh, I'm silly. Okay, we're doing modules and testing. This is 100% my fault. Okay, take 5 minutes. I'm going to switch to my modules and testing notes, which I have, and then we're going to do that in a sec. Victoria, I'm so sorry about that. We'll be good to go in like 5 minutes. distance because I'd muted them so I didn't freak them out. That's what it was. Cool. Can you hear me now? And is the audio crackly? Yup. And yup. So that's, you can hear me and the audio is, no, I know what you mean. Cool. So welcome to week 1, day 5. I'm going to make some little notes here. Please tell me if the font needs to be bigger or if, it's not visible at all. So week 1, day 5. We are talking about notes.md. We are talking about something called modules and something called testing today. This is going to be your first kind of introduction to a couple different words like modularizing. We're going to look at phrases like API and testing. Obviously, it's up here, but not testing in the sense of like being tested on or having an exam, but more like verifying, right? Verifying or like assessing quality, right? These are things that we're gonna talk a little bit about. We're not gonna dive too far into it, right? We're just gonna get like a functional kind of understanding for the first part of the boot camp, and then you'll kind of come back again to these ideas in a while, in a couple weeks. Then things will become a little bit clearer. Now, figure I'll take this opportunity to kind of talk a little bit about how the curriculum's structured. So it's a 10-week curriculum, right? Of which 8 of those weeks are like actual curriculum, where you're either going to lectures or there's like a remote week where every day you're supposed to be, doing the readings on your own. And there's like a week and a bit of, like advanced lectures, which aren't necessarily tied to the curriculum, but they're just like interesting things that various lecturers think you might need to know. Over the course of those like first 8 vanilla weeks though, right? I'll call them vanilla weeks because they're part of the standard curriculum that we have. You're going to spiral back on the same concepts more than once, right? You'll be seeing things from different points of view. If you feel like you didn't master something the very first time, right? You'll be given several opportunities to master those topics, right? So, like right now we're talking about modularizing. This isn't the only time that you're going to see creating modules, right? We're talking about testing stuff. This isn't the only time that you're going to be talking about testing stuff. Or say in 2 weeks you have database stuff, right? Again, it's not your only opportunity to learn database things. So if you feel like you make it through that portion of the curriculum, right, that portion of the boot camp, alive, but with kind of like a shaky knowledge, right? Come grab one of the like mentors and one of the instructors, and you can ensure that maybe you'll be coming back to this topic again, right? And maybe that uncertainty that you're feeling is supposed to be designed into the curriculum, right? That's just something that I want to highlight at the end of this first week here, is especially going into next week, as you work on Tiny App in week 2, it's not going to be very easy, right? It's going to be like a considerable jump in difficulty. And part of that is because you're introduced to like a bunch of new concepts, right? The thing is, it's not like if you miss the concepts on one day, not as in like if you're not here, but as in if they don't get soaked in one day, that's not the end of the world, right? Because you'll be spiraling back on it. Definitely like keep trucking, but don't be too upset with yourself, right? So that's just something I wanted to say before we start. Now, modules and testing, I want to write down the topics that we're going to go through here. So topics. We're going to talk about, let me just move this right here. I'm going to pin my little notebook. We're going to be talking about creating and consuming modules in JavaScript, specifically Node. And maybe we don't know what modules are yet. You're not supposed to. But it's going to involve the use of a couple of different words, one of them being exports, and one of them being the words require. So at the end of the lecture, I want to come back to these topics and see if these words make any sense to us. The other thing we're going to look at is something called NPM. Right? Does anybody know what NPM is yet? Awesome. One person. Cool. The rest of us might not. So we're going to explore NPM. And NPM is going to be pretty cool. Pretty cool. Anybody here a Curb Your Enthusiasm fan? Yeah. Pretty good. Yeah. So I'm just going to write something down here. I'm going to say packages containing one or more modules. And again, this sentence doesn't make any sense right now, but we're going to come back to it later, and you're going to go like, wow, look at all this knowledge that I have now. And last thing I want to do here is a very light introduction to testing. Okay. So if I was to kind of predict what the next 2 hours or hour and 45 minutes are going to look like, is that we'll go through this stuff. We'll look at NPM very lightly, take a quick break, come back, finish talking about NPM, and then we'll do the testing. So I want to make a quick note about how live coding lectures work, by the way. I don't know if anybody's gone into this. When I did your lecture earlier this week on Scope, I was writing a bit of code, and then we hopped to the whiteboard, and then we came back, and I ran it through Python Tutor. Today, I'm going to be doing something similar. I'm going to write a bunch of code, and we're going to analyze it and all that. I don't want you to follow along code-wise. I don't want you to be typing out the code on your computer while I do it. I'll be giving you a big old collection of all the code that I write. Usually I try to package in here's some bad examples, here's some stuff that doesn't work, and here's the good stuff that we did. So I just wanted to say that. Don't worry too much about following along with the code. And along the same lines, don't get too stuck into syntax. Right? Don't get too stuck into the syntax of what I'm writing. Right? Try to follow along with the bigger concepts of stuff. Syntax-wise, you can always watch the recordings or go through the notes that I give you, or there's other notes from other lecturers as well. Okay, so we are focusing on some JavaScript-specific stuff and some greater programming general stuff. These are coding concepts that we're diving deep into. One of them being this idea of module creation. So to motivate this idea of module creation, we're going to talk about what an API is first. Has anybody heard the term API before? Great. And what does API mean? Mm-hmm.
Called an API.
Mm-hmm.
I figure out, I read a bunch of articles that tried to describe what API was, but it was too jargony, and I couldn't process it.
Mm-hmm.
That was my understanding, that someone could take a program that you've written and sort of put it into their website.
Sure. Okay. I'll put that down, and you're going towards an interesting place. Yeah. So for Victoria, the suggestion over here was as an API, something that you can use to put another program into your website. Did I represent what you said correctly there?
Well, it is the program that you can use in your website.
Oh, is a program that you can.
Like a chatbot that you
Mhm.
Like that would be an example of an API. That's my understanding.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my sort of, yeah.
And then I'm going to add that in there as well. Snippet of code. Victoria, are there any ideas for what an API is or what it means to you or examples of APIs? If there are any, throw some out. So here we've got a program that you can use in your website, e.g. a chatbot that you didn't write. I like this part here, something that you didn't write that you can still make use of. And then like maybe a snippet of code.
Victoria.
Almost a driver for separate apps. Awesome. So we're going to throw that in here. And then Sammy's got something. Oh, nothing. All right. Well, you got something coming up? What? Sammy. Oh, man. Oh, snap. Oh, no way. Okay, my eyes are, you know what I need is when messages come up, I was going to say there should be a thing that says like, oh, there's a new message, and then I looked over here. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's right there. Cool. You can call an API such as Jiffy to access. Cool. So here we have, you can call an API such as Jiffy to access the GIFs and use them in your app or website dynamically, usually. So here, we have a couple different ideas. They'll overlap a little bit. We're going to pull them apart. Does anybody know what API stands for? Without Googling it. Integration, program, automatic, automatic apply. Yeah, no, that's not it. You got you got this part here, int, and you got program, yeah, and Apple. Yeah. Yeah, application. Yeah, application. Did you Google it? Oh, okay. Yeah, application programming interface. Interface. Application programming interface. So, API is going to be one of the most frustrating terms that you'll learn over the course of the boot camp, right? Very, very frustrating. Why? Because it doesn't mean anything. API is, do you know what an interface is? As like a general term, not in a technical term? What's an interface? Yeah, it's how you can interact with something. So if you're like a yuppie, be like, hey, let's interface sometime, right? Like, you know, has anybody ever said that to you? I have I have a couple friends who are like, yo, we should interface sometime. Like, yeah, right? Yeah. So I like that, and let's take this conversation offline, like that, synergize, all those words are like, I don't know. Yeah, you want to take this conversation offline? Application programming interface. I want to pull apart the word interface. As you said, it's how you can interact with something. Nate? Now, when we talk about APIs, what we're generally going to be talking about is how we can communicate with another program, right? There's some other program. We want to be able to interface with it, right? Communicate with it in a nice, clean, standardized way. And so we'll make use of an API that is exposed by that program, right? So imagine, I'm going to take this away from computers real quick. Imagine that I am locked in a room. I'm locked in a room and you want to communicate with me. And you can't like hear me. You can't hear me, and you can't send like messages to me in any other way other than slipping little pieces of paper through the bottom of the door. And next to the door, there's just a sign that explains, like, these are the 4 things that you can say to Nima, right? Like, hello, how are you doing? Are you hungry? And, like, you'll receive responses only to those, like, 3 things that you can say, right? I've created an interface between the rest of the world and me. I'm locked in my room or whatever. Say there's a dog, right? This is a completely different example. Say there's a dog, and you go, oh, here's an idea. When you see a dog on the street, and it looks fairly friendly, and it comes up to you, and it's got an owner, what do you do? Yeah, you'll like ask to pet. Be like, oh, hello, may I pet this dog? You don't just like, oh, good dog, good. You ask permission first, and okay, hey, can I pet your dog? And the person's like, yeah, go for it. And then what's the next thing that you do? You might pet the dog. I generally let the dog sniff my hand first because I've heard that that's what you're like in dog culture supposed to do. So you let the dog kind of sniff your hand, and then maybe you pet it. There's a certain set of things that you can do with this dog, right, that have been like standardized, right, or in this like interaction. So we're interfacing with the dog, or maybe you're interfacing with me as I'm locked in my room, right? Over here, if we start looking at some of the things that came out as examples, where maybe it's a program that we can use in our website. Well, that's a really good idea, because we might have a program that we didn't make. A program that we didn't make, so maybe we don't really know how it works on the inside, right? But whoever made that program gave us a list of things that we can do with it, right? A list of instructions that we can give it, or methods for using it as we embed it into our website, right? Maybe it's a chatbot, right? Here's another one. We can call an API such as Jiffy, right, to access their GIFs. Did I make Jiffy? No. Did you make Jiffy? No. But the people who did can give us access to the way that their program works, right? By exposing some I'm going to call them methods right now, exposing some methods for interacting with their program, right? See, I'm being really nebulous right now, right? I'm being really vague. In a minute, I'm going to probably, no, actually I won't. I was going to say I'll bring over the whiteboard, but it takes a while to like focus it in. So I'll draw up a little diagram. And then last, here there's this example with a driver for separate apps, and that's a good point, and we'll kind of see what that means in a second. Here we're gonna go draw online. Sketchpad, cool. Okay, so here is me. And here is a bunch of cool stuff, right? All kinds of cool stuff. We got memes. We got pictures of cats. We got data, right? What else do people want in their lives? Maybe music. Cool. We got maybe some music. Netflix. True love.
Cool stuff is different in Victoria.
Cool. Oh, let's see. Food. Food, and then Amazon Prime. All right. All right. So we have all of this. We have all of this amazing, cool stuff. But this cool stuff is hidden behind, let's see, do I get colors here? Hidden behind all this fire, and I can't reach the cool stuff. I can't reach it. So instead of me putting my hand into the fire, I can use this thing right here, which is called an API. Right?
It's not the thing itself.
Exactly. Right? Can you say that really loud for everyone, and then I'm going to repeat it for Victoria?
It's not the thing itself.
It's not the thing itself. The API is not the thing itself. The API is what allows you to interface with the thing itself. Right? I talk to this, and this thing says, all right, I'm going to go get you the memes. Right? Here's the memes, and then the API gives them to you. Right? This here is the API. And see how this could be really anything. It could be a person, right? Or, as we're going to see, it's going to be like programs. It's going to be code that works in order to usually either go get data or modify data for us, or present some piece of functionality for us, right? If we were to look at the examples that you had over here, a program that you can use in your website, sure, right, the API could be a program that we use to interact with a chatbot that we didn't write, right? An API such as Jiffy. So yeah, we could have an API running somewhere on jiffy.com, right, that we are going to, in some way or another, access and ask for data back, right? Again, the API is not the thing itself. It's the thing that goes and gets the data or modifies the data or triggers some piece of hidden functionality. Yes?
So I'm just thinking in like HTML terms, like if you're grabbing, say you clicked on a YouTube video and it has the embed link, you could actually grab that and put that on your web page. Is that the API grabbing, because it's not the actual video program, is it?
So the question here for Victoria was, when you're on like YouTube and there's like an embed video link and you can take that link and put it on your website, is that like interacting with an API? I'm going to hand wave it and kind of say yes, and then also say that I can't give you an honest answer until after your lecture on Monday. Right? On Monday, you'll be talking about some things that deal with that. So just we'll shelf that. Yeah, we'll postpone that for right now. We're gonna look at some, like, wait, everything is in hell. Yeah.
In Vancouver, it's on fire.
Oh yes. Yeah. Cool. So this is kind of the main concept that we're going to be thinking about. I'm just going to export this so I save it. Download. Cool. And I'll make sure that this is in the notes. So we can also say that if I can use an API, let me go right here. If I can use an API to communicate with the memes and with Netflix and with music, right? Another person could use it, right? Or a computer, right? Just a little, this is my little computer with the, well, it's like a little robot with an antenna. I'll give him like little 8-bit eyes. There you go. So this computer, and I'll label these. We could have programs also talking with an API. And the program might ask a particular API, hey, can I get this data or whatever, and the API can do it. So an API doesn't just have to be a way for us to communicate with a program. It can also be a way for multiple programs to communicate with each other, right? A way for multiple programs to communicate with each other. Is that a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember. So is Node kind of like an API because you're getting your Sublime text to talk to your terminal?
So is Node kind of like an API? When you say no, and let's remind me to check back in on that question at the end of the lecture to see if the rest of the stuff that we do kind of clears up why not. For Victoria, the question was, is Node kind of like an API because we use Sublime to then run the program?
Yeah, you can use Node to run the program through the terminal. So it's sort of like a way of getting those two things.
Nah. Yeah, we'll see in a minute. Cool. So APIs can allow programs to talk to each other, just stuff in general, people, programs. And it allows us to talk to an existing program and implement that stuff into your code, right? That's the biggest, most powerful thing about the idea of an API is we get a nice method for communicating with something that where people have already put a ton of work in, right? I don't want to rebuild everything from scratch every time. I'd like to import other people's work, right? That's the big thing. I would like to be able to import other people's work and use it. So, since we're talking about Node at this point of the bootcamp, we need to talk about how to package your code so that it can be imported, right? That whole process of taking somebody's work and using it in your place, right? Somebody needs to have packaged the code. So we're going to look at how that works. That whole packaging process is called modularization, right? Modularization. So I'm going to see that there's going to be a pattern with modularization, which is first, do a whole bunch of work somewhere, right? Do a whole bunch of work somewhere, then come up with a nice API, right? A nice method for interacting with that work. So here in this picture over here, somebody put a bunch of work into creating a data set of memes and Netflix and Amazon Prime and pictures of cats or whatever, right? Somebody put in all that work, right? And then they came up with a nice method for interacting with it easily. And then that API can be brought into other stuff, right? Using a word require, which we'll see soon. Once that's being required in, we can use this API. So, do I want to? Yeah, I'm going to talk about this a little bit. One of the things that this achieves, this modularization process, is cleanliness. You might have already noticed that as you're working on your assignments this week, your files get really long, right? You get a lot of lines of code. I get really stressed out when I have a bunch of lines of code in my files. And what I would really like to do is to take a big chunk of code and say, hey, put it in a different file, right? Like put it somewhere else so that I can have a couple different smaller files. And then maybe one place where all that stuff gets joined together, right? I find that clean. Another thing that it does is it helps you, or it gives you the ability to reuse sections of your code, right, in different projects, right? So we're going to soon see when I write some code that I might write some useful code where I'll go, hey, you know what? I kind of wish that I could use this in another project, and instead of having to copy and paste it, I'll be able to import it, right? There'll be like one simple command, or like one single line command to bring in all the work that I'd done previously. Yes?
That single line that you're talking about, that would be like when you're writing an HTML file and you do a source and you're linking to your JavaScript file or something. Would it be kind of like that, where you're linking them together?
So the question here was, would that like importing kind of be like when you're making an HTML file and there's a link with like a source for a JavaScript file that's being brought in? I'll say conceptually it's similar, right? Except here, instead of linking JavaScript into HTML, we're taking a bunch of JavaScript and we're going to be linking it all together, right? So let me scroll down a little bit. We are working with Node. In Node, every file becomes a thing called a module. So let me just make Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm going to get into the right folder so I can build some stuff. Yes. Cool. All right. So I'm going to make a quick new folder where I can show you a couple things. So module. Oh, sick. Do I have? No. Yeah. Now, you have so far been making files, maybe going touch test.js, right? And now I have a file called test.js in there. Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger as well. Test.js. And you've been running these files by going node and then the name of the file. I'm going to hop into test.js and do something real quick. Okay. I'm going to console.log the word module. And I get a bunch of stuff, which is weird. Because do I have any other code here? No. No other code in here. Now, in Node, every single file is a thing called a module, right? A module is a little package of stuff. And any module can be moved around, right? I didn't have to do any work to create this module right here. It already exists. It can be moved around. I can store stuff in this module, right, so that somebody else can import the thing. And this is going to be a two-step process. Notice I want to take a little bit of a deep look into what's going on here. What is this thing? It's an object, right? It's an object. I want you to, like, anytime you console log stuff or anytime you play around with stuff in Node or in any language, try to identify what type of thing is this? How can I relate this to something that I already know, right? I might not know what module is, but I know that this here is an object, and that ID looks like it's a property, right? Exports is a property. What does it point to? It points to an object. And can you tell me anything else about this object? It's an empty object, right? Now, knowing that I'm currently just console logging module and knowing that it's just an object and that there's this exports thing, right? I could console log module exports, right? I mean, I can do this. There's nothing, as far as I know, that's illegal about this. And now I get out this empty object. What else can I do with objects? I can add attributes to objects. I can add new keys to objects, right? Like, as far as I know, there's nothing illegal about that. So I could say, like, maybe I can do module exports like hello equals world. And maybe after that, I'll console log what module.exports is. Surprise, surprise, right? Like, I edited the object, and now it has hello world in it, right? Yes?
Hello world is an object. Added an attribute. I'm having a moment.
Yeah, for sure. So
Why the curly braces are around there? Because when you console log export, you just got the.
yeah, so here I'm putting hello into, I'm putting the key hello into the object,
Okay.
and I'm setting the value to world, right?
Hello.
Exactly. I mean, here's something even funkier that I could do. I could go, oh, let's just reset module exports to not even be an object. Let me set it to the number 12, right? And now when I go console log module exports, it's the number 12, right? I have control over changing these things. Like I don't, at the moment, we don't know what this is useful for, but I'm showing you that like, you see a value, like you can go change it, see what happens. Is that a question over there? Mm-hmm. Every single JavaScript file that you're running with Node test.js, right? With Node, right? So Node is going to make every file its own module, right? Yes.
Not just JavaScript file, any file.
Any JavaScript file. Node can only run JavaScript files. Yeah. Any file that's executing. Yep. So the question here for Victoria was the module object, where is it stored in terms of memory? So remember like our discussion about the stack and all of that? It gets stored on there. When Node fires up, when I go Node and I give it something, there's a program called Node that wakes up and it sets its table, right? And then it says, okay, time to read test.js, right? Before I read it, let me create this this module for it, this little bucket, right? And then it does all the work that it's supposed to do in there, right? We're going to see what happens when we work with multiple files as well in a couple minutes. So in here, I've gone something like module exports equals 12. And I'm really just going to leave this as just this line for right now, right? Just this one line. Yeah?
Sorry, so when you made this change now, is that just momentary every time you run it, that it's made that change?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like actually altered that file then if you're going to look at it from a different, like,
Okay.
another program? Is it permanently changed or is it just a moment in time?
So the question here for Victoria is, when I do something like this and change the value of module exports, am I changing just something like a moment in time, or is it permanently changing the thing to 12? I'm going to say, like, shift the way of thinking a little bit. Node is going to read this file and interpret it, right? And Node starts from scratch every time, right? So when you run node test.js, Node starts from scratch and says, I know nothing.
The bucket's empty.
The bucket's empty. Let me start from line 1. Line 2 says module exports equals 12. So I'm going to say for test.js, at the moment module exports equals 12. But here's where things get interesting, is I'm going to make a second file in here. Import test.js. I made a second file called import test.js. Right? Import test.js. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say var number equals require test.js. Sorry about that. I'm going to go require./test. I might get the syntax wrong on the first try. Just bear with me. Let me just run this. Cool. Okay, so it didn't break. I can run this and it won't break. We don't know what it's doing yet. But I'll just tell you it's not breaking, so that's a good sign. Did I make a function anywhere called require in my life? Did you see me write function require? No, I never wrote this, right? So require, this function here is built into the Node environment, right? So this function's being called. It's being called, and it's saving whatever the output of this is into a variable called number, right? Let me console log what number is. What? What? I grabbed a value from a different file. right? Like, do I have the number 12 visible anywhere here? No. I don't have it visible here, right? So from this file here, I say, hey, the test file exports just the number 12. It exports the number 12. And from this file here, I'm importing that test file. And so when you import, all of the exported values will get saved in the variable on the left, right? And this is what's going to allow us to bring in stuff from other files, right? To make these nice little modules that can be required in. Yes?
Why doesn't it pull in any of the other information that the node created in the module?
Mm-hmm.
Why does it only pull in the stuff that you've written?
Yeah, so it'll only import everything that's inside of exports.
So if you wrote a console log below it of something, just hello, it wouldn't pull in hello because that was not in it.
So if I console log hello here,
Yeah.
right? So the question here for Victoria was, what if I write something like console log hello over here, and then module exports 12, and then in import test.js, this is what I have, like nothing's changed. What happens when I run this? That's a really good question.
Oh, it is pulling it.
Right? So it's not that hello was pulled in through. The thing is, when Node starts running import test.js, it'll start from this line here. And this line says var number, so there's going to be a variable called number, is equal to the exported value from test. So the Node is going to hop over into test, and it's going to run this entire program. It's going to run console log hello. If I made another, like a couple of variables here, var saw equals dude, right? And console log W1D5, right? Like if I console logged a bunch of stuff in here and made some variables and whatever, right? All this stuff is going to run, right? And then this is going to be exported. Right? This is going to be exported. So I go and I run this thing again, right? I see hello, I see W1D5, right? And I don't see the saw dude because I never console logged it. Right? I never console logged it, but it did run. It did run, which means I could also put this in here instead. I could go module exports equals saw. Right? And now when I run this, and we'll go back to the code in a sec, but when I run this, instead of getting number 12, I'm going to get dude.
So you could fill your export with return values or whatever, only the things that you want to pull over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for Victoria here, you can fill your export in with like value, like any value that you want to be pulled over onto the other side. Question over there?
So just to confirm, I think my table already answered, but just exports is a special property?
Yes.
Okay.
Exports is a special property, right? It's a property that the people that made Node put for us there, right, to allow us to move stuff into other files, right? Now, at the moment, I'm only exporting a single value, but a lot of the time, it might be more useful to export many values, right? There might be there might be a couple like different things. Like, I'll just make this an object, right? I'll make it an object, and an object is somewhere where I can contain a bunch of things. So here's a thing, a property called say hi, which is a function which console logs, hey, how you doing? Right. And then another thing that says people, and here, this one's an array. This one goes 1, 2, 3, 4. Right. Is that a question over there? Like say hi could refer to people? Yeah. I mean, I guess so. You could go. Let me run this real quick, and I'll put console.log. Oh, I mean, you can. So for Victoria, the question was, inside of like this say hi function that I've started to write, can I refer to properties inside of module that are not exports? I'll say yeah. I can't think of a reason for why like you would need to or want to, right? For the purposes of this lecture, I'm only going to focus on the exports property of module, but I do invite you to look at the other ones, right? It's just a little bit outside of the scope of this lecture. Yeah, so we'll go module exports, and I'm gonna make this, for right now, really just say hi, because I want to show you that you can pass functions back and forth as well. I'm gonna go into import test, and when I console log this thing, instead of calling it number, I'll call it imported things, right? Just nicer name. The stuff that I get is say hi that is pointing to a function. What's that?
It doesn't run the function.
It doesn't run the function. I've just received it, right? So I could run it if I wanted to by going imported things dot say hi, right? Imported things dot say hi. I'm accessing that method in there. Imported things is not defined. Oh, because I called it imported thing instead of things typo. And now what I get is, hey, how you doing, right? See, I packaged some code that might be useful in another file, and now I've started to bring it in and use it somewhere else, right? See how we're getting towards the idea of an API, right? Like my thing is not currently over here, the code. This stuff is not dealing with anything critical. It's not really getting into data or whatever, but we're getting towards being able to use some line of communication that's being imported in, right? Where this becomes really neat is, what if I have something like var num equals 12 over here, and this thing says, instead of say hi, let me make another one that says say num. Then it goes function console.log num. I'm going to comment out these other ones so that they don't, right? Say num. So I'm going to export this say num function that console logs this number. But this number only exists in this file. It only exists in this file, right? So this is giving this file here access to reading that number potentially, right? If I go imported things, say num, right? I should get hopefully 12, and I can check this. I'll go run, and I got 12, right? I got the number 12. Now, here's a question for you. From this file here, like, is there any way for me to write code here that changes the value of num with what you know?
Well, I mean, wouldn't you have to go into the other function to add a parameter into?
I'm saying from just this one file. So for Victoria, Shmoo was saying, would we have to go into the other file and add a parameter? That's a great idea, right? That's a great idea, but I'm not doing that right now. I'm saying just this one file. Over there?
You already imported the file, so you already have say num in that file.
This thing here? I have say num. From here? Yeah, I can't edit it anymore. Was that what you were going to say as well?
No, it's okay.
Did I represent what you said correctly, or yeah? Right. So say num has been imported. This stuff here, it doesn't exist anymore in a way that we can edit, right? So it's one directional. I've created a thing where I can receive data, but I can't mutate it, right? I can't edit it. And now we've done it's like a little bit of security, right? Maybe say num is like a special secret number, or not secret, but a special protected number. Yeah, proprietary code, right? Stuff that I don't want to change, but I do want to give people access to using. Right? That's what I've created here, is a way of accessing some values or some data or some functionality, right, in a limited scope, right, in a limited way, right? It's neat. Yeah, I'm putting in specific locks, right? I could do tons of stuff in here, right? So I think what we're going to do, since it's 10, right, I know we started a little late, we're going to take like a 5 to 10 minute break, right, unless there are questions right now. Victoria, do you have any questions? We're going to wait a minute there. And in the meantime, over here, any questions? Yes.
Is this the required function in the test software?
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible to access to that?
Ooh, so you're saying from test.js, can I do require, like, test.js?
Import test.
Import test.
He's saying require, in that require call the import test.
Oh, import test.
Back and forth.
I mean, yeah.
If you rename-
Import test doesn't have anything necessarily being exported yet, but like, if I was to do that,
If you rename num in export test to 6 and then pull it back. I mean, it might be a little outside of scope, but
so this one here doesn't actually have access to changing num, right? I could from here export its own like its own thing or whatever, but it would be this is num, not the other one's num. They'll be separate, right? But I'm actually interested in seeing what happens if I run this right now real quick. Cool. Yeah, I guess you are allowed to require import test in here. What you're trying to do is like a cyclical kind of like you were trying to see if it breaks it. Yeah. So I have an example for something that causes weird things in this nature that we'll look at after the break. Did Victoria have questions? Just thumbs ups. Awesome. So we're gonna take like a 5-10 minute break. If you come up with more things, just ask them at the beginning, and Victoria will let you know when we're starting up. Cool. All right. Welcome back, everyone. Just want to check on audio for Victoria. Does this sound good? Oh, Peter Nolan has joined the game. Cool. Yeah. All right. So when we left off, we had looked at module exports, right? Are we feeling, if not perfect and crystal clear with exactly how this works, do you have a little bit of a feeling for the usefulness and the mechanics of this? Awesome. Cool. Because can you start thinking about maybe some of the code that you've written so far that you would have liked to maybe reuse, right, and put somewhere? Yes.
Yeah, like what we were saying when the break started.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the higher order functions that we were writing yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I could see if one of those could be useful across different programs. You can have it in its own file, and then you just use the require in all of it.
Perfect, right? So for Victoria, the suggestion here was, hey, like, what about those higher order functions that we worked on yesterday? Some of them seemed really useful. It'd be nice to be able to put them somewhere and then import them into other assignments and other projects that we've worked in, or that we'll work in. Great. That's a really good idea. In fact, it'd be awesome if there was some kind of like place where everybody could store useful code that they've worked on, right? That'd be super cool. And it'd be neat if these like modules that we make, right? If these modules that we make and we store somewhere, it'd be super cool if like we could like manage them somehow, right? Like some kind of program that would let you like manage all these like packaged modules, right? These like packaged modules like for Node. Like let's see if we could come up with like some I'll call these modules like packages, right? Like, because module, package, they're kind of interchangeable as terms. What if we had some package like manager, right? So that I'm like, oh, I would like to download and import this package, right? Or I would like to uninstall this package, or, and what if this was specific for Node, right? Like, what if we had one that was specifically just for Node, like a Node package manager, like a NPM, right? Like a NPM, right? Or an NPM, right? NPM, like a Node pack. You know what? Let's go register this. Let's go to Node package manager and create. Oh, what? They beat me to it. No. Oh man. Oh, again. Last time it was Facebook. Now it's NPM. I just keep getting swiped. So there's a thing called the Node package manager. It's a package manager for the JavaScript programming language, specifically for the Node environment. We use it a lot. Now, NPM is two different but related things. NPM is both a program that you will have, like you already have, but you will use on your machine, right? It's both a program that you use on your machine and it's a website with npm.js. Right? It is both of these things. On the website, first of all, npm does not stand for nominal package missing, or like anytime you click on the heart here, it changes to nary a package missing, nourished personal mucus. Now printing money. Yeah. Woo, noble pug mullet. So npm is this website where people will host the modules that they've made, right? Maybe they made those higher order functions and they say, hey, you know what? This is useful for me, and it might also be useful for other people. I'll upload it to npm, right? And we could go to npm and we could search for packages, right? We could search for modules that other people have made. Let me look for maybe math ones, and I'll go math, right? I searched for math, and look, KZH published a package 7 years ago on mathematical functions, right? Salazar, 3 years ago, there's a math package as well, right? Math random, is number, big integer. These are all different different modules that people have made that have specific functionality. In this case here, this person's written the isNumber module returns true if a number or string value is a finite number, right? And then they'll also say what it happens to be useful for, right? So it's what we'll call a registry, somewhere where we can register our modules and make them available for other people, right? There are a ton of modules, a ton. Look at that. Just the word math got me 3,947 of them. Right? Let me look up. Oh, Jiffy was one of the things that somebody suggested early. Jiffy, right? 85 packages found. A simple wrapper around Jiffy's API. Right? Here's another one. React Jiffy select, whatever this is. Right? There's all these specific Jiffy random. Get a random GIF from Jiffy. Right? Like, there's all these different modules that we can choose to install and use. Right? How do we do this? How do we do this? Well, you already have the program npm installed on your machine. Right? It comes when you install Node on your machine, and it's already been installed in your Vagrant. But what this lets you do is, I'm going to make a new file here, make dir npm demo. There you go, npm demo. What this lets me do is type the words npm. And it doesn't say, like, oh, you can't, like, command not found or anything. Like, you have this in there. If you go npm and just run it, it'll list out a whole list of commands that you could use. One of them being init. Now, init's going to be interesting. Let me go ls in here real quick. What do we see inside of the npm demo folder? Absolutely nothing. Absolutely zero, like nothing in here. Let me run a quick command, npm init, right? npm init, and I press enter. I've got a little wizard here now. A thing pops up saying, hey, this utility will walk you through creating a package.json file, right? We're going to find out what this is pretty soon. But it asks us a bunch of questions. For example, what do you want to name your package? By default, it'll name it the name of the folder, right? I'll say, yeah, name of the folder is fine. What version do you want to start at? OK, I'll start at 1, right? Give me a description. A cool package or a cool module, dude, right? Give it whatever kind of description. Here's an entry point. This doesn't do anything yet. I'm just going to press enter. Here's a test command. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to press enter. Here's a git repo. I'm just going to spam enter, right? Just spamming enter. All these questions. I don't want to answer this. And what it does at the end is it prints out an object, right? And this is a JSON object. Right? Are you familiar with JSON at this point? Not yet? JSON is a JavaScript object, right? Except the keys are written with quotes around them. OK? It's one way for serializing a bunch of data into a file. And you're going to get familiar with it over the course of the boot camp, right? I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it right now. Think of it as a configuration file, right? So here, there's a configuration saying name, npm demo, version 1.00. And this has been saved in this folder. If I go ls, I see something new in here, a package.json file that was made for me, right? Let me open it up in my editor here. I'm going to close this stuff. npm demo, package.json. OK? Package.json, and there's nothing particularly useful in here as of yet, right? As of right now, there's nothing particularly useful. But I might find a module that I want to use now on the internet. So I'm going to go to the npm registry here, and I'm going to type something like, actually, get random GIF from Jiffy. Oh, you need an API. Ignore this. We're going to do instead cowsay. OK, so cowsay is a configurable talking cow. Like, what else could we possibly want? Let me click on this. So I could install this module that lets me make a configurable talking cow. Of course I want a configurable talking cow. You kidding? Right? How do we install it? Well, we can npm install cowsay, right? Let's ignore the little -g for now, right? And I'm going to do it as npm install, or you can just write the letter I, cowsay. It's useful because when you click on that up here, it like copies it to your clipboard. Now, when I go to my terminal, if I go npm install cowsay, it's going to take a little minute, and then it'll start downloading all the code for that package that that person made, right? If I wanted to see the code, like I could go to here, and I think if I go into their like GitHub, I'm able to see the code that they wrote for cowsay, right? And it's like, oh, look at all this code or whatever, right? But I don't care. I don't care how much work this person put into making cowsay. I just want to use it, right? Like I just want to use it. So I could look at the information over here on the npm page that tells me the usage, right? So I could use cowsay from the command line, or I can use it as a module. And I'm only going to focus on this right now. Apparently, I can require cowsay, right? I can require cowsay, and then I could console log things. Cowsay, you pass in some parameters. There's a text, there's an E and a T, right? And if I wanted to find out what E and T stand for, I could just keep looking through here. Oh, eyes and tongue. Looks like E and T are like shorthand for eyes and tongue. I think higher up in the GitHub, there's going to be more information. But I'm just going to copy this code over here, right? Put it into my npm. Whoops. Great question here. Could you remind me to answer that in a second? Awesome. Thanks. So I'm going to just bring that into this npm demo folder and just make a new file. I can call it whatever. I'll call it index.js for no real reason. Paste in that cowsay stuff, and then run it. Node index.js. And I got my I'm a module, right? I've used somebody else's code, right? Now, there's that question from Victoria. Is any of the code on npm audited in any way? No, not at all, right? It's not. So you need to be careful about what you bring in, right? Take a look at how many people have installed that module, for example. 9,000 weekly downloads looks pretty good to me, I guess. I could go on GitHub and see if anybody left any messages in the issues saying like, dude, stop stealing my credit card info, right? So we're kind of, that's a great question. We're kind of leaving things up to chance. And that gets into a place that's worth thinking about, is when we use these APIs, when we use other people's code, we're relinquishing some form of control, right? We're giving control off to somebody else, right? And that's something to think about, right? How much do we want to be able to control our application? How much should somebody else have a hand in doing so, right? How much trust do we have? That's a really interesting question, and I do suggest looking into something called left pad. Look into this for npm module history. Okay, if there's a little bit of time at the end, I'll talk about left pad. Now, I brought in this module here, the I'm a module, the little cowsay module. Is there anything fundamentally very different about what I'm doing on this line than what I did in the other files?
There's no period and forward slash for cowsay. It's just calling it with brackets. Oh, is it a JSON file?
So for Victoria, the answer here was really, like, the only real difference is that when I'm requiring in cowsay, I didn't have a dot and a slash in front of it. Right? I didn't have a dot and a slash. Dot and a slash is going to tell me start looking in this directory, right? In this directory test. So in the other file that I was working with, I was able to load a module that I'd made in that directory. If it happened to be in a different folder, I could, slash whatever and keep finding it until I have the path. If I am importing a module that I npm installed, then we don't need a dot and a slash. Like we don't write that, we just write the name of the module, right? That's it.
Node then knows where to find it.
Exactly. If you write cowsay like this, Node will know where to find it, right? So in this way, it looks almost identically identical to the other code that we'd written. It's just the path is different. Yes? If it's a different project, yes, you will have to npm install it again, right? And actually, right now, if we take a look at the package JSON that had been created originally, we go to package JSON, and what do we see here now?
Oh, because you're requiring it.
Yeah, so the dependencies, which weren't here before, it's added a thing now that says dependencies cowsay, right? It has added cowsay, that module, to our list of things that our program depends on, right? A list of things that our program depends on. So this file, over time, as you npm install more and more stuff, becomes a canonical place where all of the things that your program needs to run are listed out. And anybody who needs to run your program can use your npm install, not npm install, package JSON to install all of the things that you need. Interestingly, I don't need to run the npm install cowsay command. I could also just write this in the dependencies and then run a command that is just npm install on its own. And this will go through, look at all the dependencies, and install any of the ones that you don't have yet, right? Any of the ones that you don't have yet. I have everything, so it hasn't added anything. And I want to show you where this stuff gets added. There's a node modules folder. If I open this up, I'll see a whole bunch of stuff which I didn't write, and among them is cowsay, right? Cowsay also depends on other things, so cowsay will bring in stuff. And those things that it brings in also depend on other things, so those things will bring in stuff. And this tree will get created. But we as developers, we don't care. We don't worry about it. We just go npm install cowsay. Yes?
So I have two questions, one from me, one from Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is, why do you not need to call it when is it because it's a JSON file, so it operates differently? Like, why do you not just give the path?
Of my package JSON?
Yeah, like when you're doing the require,
Mm-hmm.
and then why?
So one of the things to remember as you're going through your coding journey is that there's a limited set of things that you can actually see, right? You're writing code, and many of the lines of code that you're writing, those are the instructions that are running, right? But there are also some instructions that are hidden away from you, including the fact that when I run an npm project, when it goes, a node project, when the require runs, Node is going to go look into the node modules to see if it can find it.
Right.
Okay? Node's going to go into the node modules to see if it can find it.
That's where it goes without the path.
Exactly.
The node module.
Yeah. So you give it a name, it'll check the node modules, right? And again, if I was to open up my node modules and look into there, I see a thing that says cowsay, right? The node modules is populated by this package JSON. So just to show you another example of a module, let me bring in a module called chalk real quick. Here's a module called chalk, and really all it does is when you console log it, or when you console log using chalk, you can make nicely colored stuff in your terminal. You can install it with npm install chalk, and then you require chalk, and you can console log stuff like this. So I just want to show you the usage of it real quick. I'm going to say cowsay is there, and then var chalk equals require chalk. And then I'm going to go into here and also steal this code that says console log chalk.blue hello world. If I wanted to find out exactly how to use chalk, I would read the documentation, but I'm just copying an example right now. Right? Notice, I have not run npm install chalk yet. I have not run that command, right? If I was to look into my package JSON, it does not say npm, it does not say chalk. And if I was to look into my node modules, they do not say chalk. So when I try to run my program, it crashes. And what's the error that it gives me? Well, it says I cannot find the module chalk. Right? So there's two different things that I could do. One of them would be go npm install chalk. Right? That's one thing that I could do. Or the other would be to go in here and say chalk. And then I think star does it. I could list chalk in here. Right? When you look in the dependencies, it'll say like the thing and then the version number of it. Star, if I remember correctly, is just going to be anything. Yeah, like a wildcard. Right? Now, I'm going to run node index.js again, and I get the exact same error, cannot find module chalk, because I haven't installed it yet. I haven't downloaded the code for it yet. I have to go npm install. And now this is going to go through my package JSON and install everything it can find, right? Now I go look at my package JSON, like that still has chalk. I look at my node modules, and my node modules should have chalk somewhere in here. They're not showing it. Maybe I need to refresh. There we go. Yeah, I just had to refresh my folder thing, but my node modules have chalk in here, right? And I just want to show you, as soon as I run node index.js, I also now get my blue out. Right? I'll answer that question first, and then over here. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, this is from Victoria.
Yeah, right.
Can you install your own module in order to not require a path, or just add it into the node modules directly?
Right. So if you're using npm, right, what you can do is upload your own modules to the npm registry if you'd like, right? You could upload it there and then npm install into any of your own projects. You can make your npm stuff secret so that other people can't see it. That's something that you can do. Instead of installing your own module, you would not go manually into the node modules directory, right? So I'm just going to say this, like, do not go into the node modules directory and change things in here, right? This directory is automatically managed. Automatically. You don't change anything in here, right? Okay. Yeah?
My question was that, so this is all in that npm demo which you created in the beginning. When you first installed Calsay, it created the node module folder.
Yes.
During that process.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have this, so we need to put this in here too. And then any future one, it's automatically. And it's a hidden folder?
It's not a hidden folder. My Git is just not tracking it. So for Victoria, the comment here was the node modules folder. That directory is created when you run npm install, right? If it's not already there, right? So if you run npm install something, or just npm install on its own, if there is no node modules folder, it will get created automatically. All right. So there are many useful npm packages, right? Many useful ones, right? In my notes that I'm going to send out, I have like a couple that you might find interesting. You're going to be introduced to tons of them over the course of the boot camp, and as you work on your own projects, you can journey and find whatever kind of neat stuff is out there. Interestingly, it's also really simple to publish your own package, right? I don't know if I'll have time to do that today, but maybe I'll try to put in some extra instructions in the notes on how you can publish your own package for fun. npm publish. There's a command for this, which you might want to look at just for the fun of it. So I want to move on to, well, I'm going to say one more thing, actually. That package JSON file, right, that is specific to Node, right? But there's other languages that have a similar concept, right? There's other languages that have this concept of making modules and having a package registry, right? It's not unique to Node, right? So as you go into Ruby in 5 weeks, 6 weeks, right? You'll explore this idea again, right? Yes.
Question from Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
Can you host your own packages someplace else and import them? Can you import from alternative locations?
So the question here was, can you host your own packages someplace else and import them? Can you import them from alternative locations? Yes. So with the npm package JSON from GitHub, when you npm install stuff, like you can and you can pass a URL. You can pass a URL in the dependency pointing to somewhere other than npm, but I wouldn't recommend doing that at any point in the first half or really all of boot camp. It's more like, yeah, that's a really cool question and you totally can, but for our purposes, we're just going to stick to just the npm registry, right? Don has something to add, and I will echo back in a second.
One thing I will add is that npm gives you the ability to pass a GitHub repo, so you can npm install and pass it a GitHub repo address, and so it can install packages from a specific repo, which is a really nice thing if you need to install the specific version of a package or somebody else's version other than what's on npm. A lot of people will fork and make their own version. And that's the most common other thing you see, but npm also gives you the ability to do private package lists. So for your company, for example, you can have a private set of packages that exist for that company, and you'll typically see that by them installing from their like Git or GitLab, whatever.
So for Victoria, what Don said over here was that npm gives you the ability to pass in a GitHub repo as the address to install modules directly from a GitHub repo, which is nice if you want to install a specific version of something that maybe somebody forked. And again, npm also lets you make private modules. So say you're working at a company and you don't want to share your modules with other people, you can have private modules like that as well. So that's a really neat question, and I'm gonna put a link to the documentation for package JSON. It's very long and it's terse, but you might find it fun to just kind of dig around in. By no means a requirement for understanding this stuff at all, though. Now, I would like to wait. Did you have a question? No. Okay. I would like to move into testing very lightly, right? Very quick kind of overview of what testing is, and the purpose of this is not to teach you about how testing works. I just want you to understand how the mock test is going to work, right? I think the mock test is either here or there. Victoria, it's going to be with you. The way the mock test today in the afternoon is going to work is that you will be given a series of like functions, right? A bunch of functions that have not been implemented yet, right? A bunch of functions that are not working yet. And you'll go through the process of filling these functions in bit by bit. And you can test to see if your functions are running or running properly with a specific command that you will see when we do the mock test. And as you work through the test, you're going to see that there's all these little test cases, right? So say, for example, and this is just an example. I'll delete this in a second. But say, for example, there's a function return 2. Right? There's a function return 2, and in your test, it'll say make this function return the number 2. Right? And at the moment, maybe it starts off returning 0. Right? You're going to be seeing something like this, and then you'll be running a command on your command line, right? You're going to be running a command that then prints out something like 0 tests passed, right? And then it'll say something like expected 0 to be 2. And we'll see this in a second, but you'll have information saying that your function that you wrote is not correct yet. And you'll go in and you'll change this to return 2, and then you run it, and it'll say one test passed. And then you go, yay, good for me, I can move on to the next thing, right? So this is like what you're going to be doing in the mock test this afternoon, and I want to show you how that works underneath, right? I want to show you how that works underneath. So I'm going to make another folder here. Let me just, whoop. Tests, test. Okay. Oh, you know what? Actually, let me delete this one. I have a nice one already. There's in the notes that you're going to see when I send them out with the code, there is a folder called hip hop. There's a folder called hip hop with a file called hiphop.js. And if you were to look at it, there's an array of all my favorite artists. I only listen to 3 artists apparently. No, Nima's secret favorite artist is Taylor Swift, right? We've got Taylor Swift over here. I've got a function that returns a bunch of different like words or whatever, depending on what's passed in. It's just a bunch of neat code, a bunch of cool code that somebody might want to use somewhere. So then I'm also module exporting this stuff, right? I invite you to take a look at how I've set this up later. Now, before I publish this, or before I give this to someone and say, hey, here you go, here's all my hip hop stuff that I made, if you would like to use it in your program, I want to verify that my code works properly. I want to verify that it works properly. And something that I could do is write a bunch of code, like function test, that goes through and makes sure that when you call, for example, adlibs on mostdef, adlibs on mostdef, it returns bucka bucka bucka, right? So maybe I go if this, then console.log. Good job. One of the cases works, right? I've made one, and then okay, I'll have to do another one here. If, and I'll have to do it for some other people, for Lady Leisha, right? Like a couple different people, and test it manually and all that. And it just becomes a lot of work. And then at the end of it, I have to also call the function test and run it, right? Now, you're going to be working on fairly big projects eventually, right? Fairly big. You want to ensure that every little facet of your program works. And it becomes really annoying to have to write your own little framework for testing all the functionality of your program. So, being the lazy developers that we are, we say, hey, has somebody solved this problem before for us? And I'll go into maybe NPM, and I'll search for test. Oh, sick. Test runner? Test framework? Like all these words that seem to have something to do with what I want. Now, I'm going to open up Chai, and I'm going to open up a thing called Mocha. Right? Mocha is a test framework, right? And when I use the word framework, I'm just saying it's a bunch of code that somebody made, right? That's going to let us run tests in JavaScript, in Node.js. How do we install it? npm install Mocha, right? npm install Mocha, and then we're going to see how this works. npm install is going to be your best friend. You can do anything. Let me try something. npm install true love. And we wait. Oh, it was that easy. Oh no, not found. Okay, all right. So, I guess not. But one day, one can dream. So npm install Mocha. Be able to run this in here. So I'm just going to go into my hip hop folder real quick. npm install Mocha. And I have already installed it, so it's not going to necessarily like overwrite anything. But oh, I guess it It just updated. But if I was to go into my hip hop folder and look at my package JSON, like I have Mocha in here, right? Now I have Mocha in here as a thing called a dev dependency. A dev dependency. It's a dependency that is only needed for development purposes. I don't want to dive into this right now, but I'm going to put a note in the notes that I'll send out if you want to do some extra reading, but it's not at all required for you to understand what the difference between this and a dependency is right now. Now, what this will let me do is, in any file within hip-hop, I can write a bunch of tests. I can write a bunch of tests. So I made myself a little test folder. Made myself a test folder. And the way that this works is you have to require in the thing that you want to test. So I'm requiring in that hip hop module that I made. Right? I've required in the adlibs, or not required in, I've pulled out the adlibs like this just to make it easier to handle, right? But I could very well just write hiphop.adlibs every time. And then I use a thing called assert. And assert is just a series of functions that are going to make it simple for me to write checks. Like checking to see if a number is bigger than another number, or checking to see if two values are the same, or checking to see if two values are not the same. Instead of writing that out in awkward JavaScript like double equals or whatever, greater than, it'll let me write like almost plain English, right? Assert that these two things are equal or something like that, right? So, I'm going to answer one question, then we'll dive into the code. Yes?
The question was one question from Victoria, but I've got a question too. And my question was, assert, is that part of Mocha?
So I'll answer the Victoria question first. Did you install Mocha locally? If so, can you use it globally as well? You can install it locally or globally, right? So I didn't use the word global earlier. Basically, the npm modules that you install, right? If you just go npm install and then the name of the thing, that will only be installed in the node modules for that one project. If instead you go npm install -g, this is going to install that module to make it available for any project on your computer, right? This is not always useful, right? Because we might want different versions of a module for different projects, right? So -g is not always the best thing to do. I've installed Mocha locally so that my one project has a specific version of Mocha, and if another project that I have has an older version of Mocha that needs to stay at that version, it doesn't get overwritten. That's why I like keeping my things local like that. Additionally, when you go npm install -g, this does not write itself into your package JSON, so it's hard for you to remember what your program depends on. Yes?
Where does it put it then?
Where does it put it? There's a node modules folder for your computer that's hidden somewhere. And the other question was?
Just on the other file that you mentioned a second ago with the
Assert?
assert. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a thing.
Yeah.
I can't remember the word. So that's part of Mocha.
So assert is a module that is built into Node.
Oh, okay.
Assert is a module that's built into Node. I could find other modules that do the same thing. If you Google the words assertion library, right, you'll find many different ones. And really all they do is the same thing but with different words. So some people like the way the different ones look. Right now I'm using the built-in assert that Node gives me, so I didn't have to npm install this one. And I can write tests. I can write tests in this fashion here. We go describe, and I'm describing a certain bit of functionality. So here I'm describing the hip-hop adlibs functionality. And then we pass it a callback, right? Like you've seen this kind of stuff before here, right? I'm passing a callback, right? So describe is a function that takes two parameters, a string and a callback. And then inside of that callback, I've access to a bunch of things, like this it method, or it function, right? And it is really just used to nicely write out like plain English or plain language sentences, right? That you can use to describe a certain piece of functionality. Like it should say bucka bucka buck bucka buck bucka bucka when the artist is most deaf. Or it should say bra when the artist is Lady Leisha, right? Like these are the things that it should do. I can write the actual functionality to test it by going assert that these two values are equal. The adlib for most deaf is equal to bucka buck bucka bucka, and the adlib for Lady Leisha is this thing over here, right? Now, I look at this one, and my intuition is that this should pass maybe if I've looked at like the code before, and then I look at these, and I'm noticing that the it is different than the thing in the assert. I'm like, let's see if this code actually runs. Let's actually test this code. Now, in your package JSON, you can put, let me go to the hip-hop. You can put a test command inside of the scripts. I'm not going to explain too much about this right now, but whenever you write something along the lines of this in here, you can do something like inside of your command line npm run and then the name of the script to run a script. But for right now, I'm just going to run the word mocha. And when you run mocha inside of a folder, inside of a project, it will look everywhere to find test files.
Like the specific word test.
I don't think it looks for the word test. It'll look for things that have the dependencies, or not dependencies, that use the, where did I put it? It'll look for things that use like describe and stuff. I mean, we can test that out. Let's see if I change this folder here to, not new folder, but if I rename this to yada, 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 and I rename this thing also to blah, 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 blah. So these things are no longer named test. If I run mocha, oh, sick. Yeah, I guess it didn't find it. So it looks like it looks for test files that like have the word test in them. I didn't know that. Yeah. So it looks for files that are named something like adlibs test. Right? Let's see if this works. So maybe I need a folder with the word test in it and then stuff inside of it. Let me call this, sorry about that. Let me call this here test. And then I run it. And now it found it. Right? And the things that it prints out are nice. It goes, hey, hip hop adlibs. This test passed, the one where you said should say bucka buck bucka bucka passed. But this one here didn't pass. It failed for some reason. Right? It failed for some reason, and it'll show me even what the failure was. It said this was the value that it was expecting, but this was the value that it like received. Right? Or sorry, my bad. This was the value it right here. This was the value that it was expecting, this here, but it received some other value, right? And I could go into my hip hop code and debug it and go like, why isn't it doing exactly what I want it to do? And eventually get to a place where all my tests are passing, right? So I'll tell you that like the issue here is that Lady Leisha's adlibs are this. These are the adlibs here that are being returned by my function, but in my test, it's expecting something else, right? So if I made those two things match, right? If I made those two things match, then when I run my tests, all of them pass, right? Now, I really want to stress, I don't need you right now to worry about like how these tests work too much, right? Like writing tests and all of that. I think you might have a little bit in your assignments just to play around with, but it's not a big part of the program. It's really just when you're working on the mock test later today, right? you will see this kind of output, right? And you will only have access to the code that you're writing, right? So if in my hip hop, like if this was your code that you were working on, it's wrong, and you run the code, like you run your tests, and it says there's one broken, that's an indication to you that you should look into your code and figure out how to make this thing pass the test, right? This is your introduction to something called test-driven development, where we write tests and then we write code to make those tests pass, right? Okay, so that's the last thing that I wanted to cover as far as new content, right? I know this was a lot to kind of lay on you, so I want to go back to the notes, right? And the only things that I really want you to think about are modularizing and APIs, right? Modularizing is a thing. You've seen examples of it. You're going to have notes to like really dig around in really soon, right? And APIs are really just this picture right here, right? Like that's it. It's just this picture. I want the memes. Give me the memes, right? Yeah. So the mock test, again, is today, right? Don't stress out about it. It's going to be a good time, right? It's just going to be a couple like programming challenge questions, right, to test your JavaScript skills. You're going to have 2 hours to work on it here, right? Then you'll have 3 hours? Yeah, maybe an hour and a half. You're going to have a set amount of time to work on it here, but you'll actually have the rest of the weekend as well to finish it, right? So don't stress out too much. My recommendation for you as you're working on the test is keep running those tests, right? You're going to see the instructions really soon that look something along the lines of this. I'm not going to let you read them right now because I don't want you to spoilers. But you're going to have commands to run that go npm run question, whatever question it is, right? I want you to regularly run this command, right? Regularly run it and see what progress you've made, right? I'm going to re-say that again when we do the mock test soon. Cool. Have a great rest of the morning. There don't seem to be any more questions from Victoria. So if you do have questions, though, please reach out. And I'm going to be around. Notes are going to be out really soon. Like, I'm going to try to get them out in the next 15 minutes. Cool. See y'all. I'm going to be around.